any other type of election system. Just doesn't happen.
Okay,
I can show you that in the literature, but that's one of the areas where we can save money.
thank you. Looks like way back here along the window. Thank you.
Senator Harman, I'm Sanjay Dalal in Irvine. I have a business in Irvine. I'm an entrepreneur. Thank you for inviting me. I have a question. I know you talked about jobs living from California, and to states outside California. Specifically, you talked about Texas. I wanted to know what specific measures are you creating this year to keep the jobs and businesses here, number one.
Okay.
And number two, what are you doing to help the small businesses and entrepreneurs grow and flourish here in California? And I want to know some real measures, not about Democrats this, Republicans this. I want to hear about what are some things you will do, either regulation-wise or maybe limit the regulation or kill the regulation, as you say, to allow businesses to grow more. Thank you.
I would put that in two categories. We've talked quite a bit, and in fact this town hall was focused on regulatory reform. Everywhere the Assemblyman and I go to groups like this, whether it's trade association, chamber of commerce, Rotary Club, the thing we hear over and over and over again is excessive regulatory reform. I talked to the folks from, it's a power company, they own a bunch of utility power plants around the country. For some reason I'm having a senior moment. They have a power plant in Northern California that's been in the regulatory approval process for 15 years. 15 years waiting to get approval for a power plant. So regulatory reform, and Don and I have listed several that are sponsored by other members of the legislature. Don and I have probably co-authored, means we've signed onto those bills. On all of that is gone. It's not going anywhere. Now, you said you didn't want to talk about Republicans, Democrats. I won't. You figure it out. Why is it gone? We've told you already. So regulatory reform. And then the issue that Frank Singer brought up, the easy one, is tax reform. In this business I talked about the ripple effect. If we have this tax reform, you would see more people push to work. So that's something. Those are the two real job creator types of legislation that should go on the books. During the budget debate, we talked with the governor and with legislative Democrat leaders on the other side of the aisle about that. Sure. And they walked away from the table. So that's where it's at. It's unfortunate, but in my view, that's the two things. And the other one, just a quick point, is these job numbers are a little bit deceptive. Right. What's happening, and I think Don mentioned this, the higher paying jobs, the $90,000, $100,000 a year, well compensated employee is leaving, right, but being replaced by low to moderate income earners. And so it looks like, oh gee, California only went down 0.1% to 1%, or maybe we even gained a little bit. Well, those are just bodies, those are just numbers. It doesn't say what those people are earning and therefore paying an income tax. And we are seeing a flight from California of good, well-paying jobs going to Texas, Arizona, Nevada, that kind of thing. Don?
Specific things that I would do are, they're in your hand.
Sure.
I would advocate for passing much of it, not all of what's listed here as good business bills. And so the specifics are tied to the legislation. But let me give you maybe an overarching theme. And again, I draw on the chairman, CEO of Carl's Jr., Andy Puzder. He wrote a book. It's called Job Creation, and the subtitle is, and I may get this not entirely right, but how it works and why government doesn't get it. I think it's the subtitle, or something very close to that. And the main theme of that book is the lack of certainty in the environment, lack of certainty in the tax code, lack of certainty in the labor code, lack of certainty in, you name the regulatory code. I know you want specifics. Well, the specifics are here, but the general problem is we're always tinkering. There were 2,323 bills introduced into the legislature, Senate and Assembly in 2010, 2011. I assure you there were not 2,323 good ideas. What we do is we constantly tinker. Somebody comes up with a good idea, and we're going to change this code here, we're going to change that code there, we're going to pass this regulation over here. And what Husder says, and what I frankly have heard from a number of other businessmen that I've dealt with, and I was going to say, remember, you don't know this, I practiced business litigation for about 25 years, not quite, before getting into the legislature. I've worked with businessmen professionally all of my career. What drives them nuts rightly is the lack of certainty. You don't know from 1 year to the next how the tax code will treat this employee. Okay, let's do this. Let's, in the legislature, in year one, pass a budget and do nothing else. Come home, get a real job. And then in year two, we'll evaluate and make changes to the laws. And let business digest those changes, rather than constantly tinkering, and more than tinkering. Sometimes we're throwing monkey wrenches into the works. But let's just step back and give businesses an opportunity to digest the reforms that we passed and to work with them. You know, and a great example of that is what the governor did with enterprise zones this year in his budget. Now, enterprise zones, you know, you can say, yes, they're good job creators, and they help traditionally blighted areas. You can say, no, they don't work. But whatever you say, you have to realize that certain businesses, dependent upon the promises made by government as to what benefits they would get in enterprise zones. Capital gains, depreciation, labor rules, and the governor this year in his budget just completely pulled the rug out from underneath all those businesses. Well, who in the world, if you've got a small business and it is your livelihood and it is all of your personal savings and it is how you're going to put your kids through college and provide for your retirement, how in the world are you going to trust Sacramento to not change the rules on you again? Okay, we've got to stop doing that. And you know, I'd like a moratorium. I'd like a 2-year budget done in the first year, and then the second year, you know, look at regulation. I think it's things like that. We need to make some changes, and those strike me as sensible ones.
I'll just mention this just very briefly because I see a couple, but one of the things that Don's talking about is a budget in the first year, and then what do we do the second year? I had